How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast gems.
War Eagle, and welcome to another edition of Ever to Podcast. This is our somewhat lately regular get-together in audio format to catch you up on the latest Auburn news, topics, discussions, things that you need to be aware that are happening on social media. So when you're around the water cooler talking about the Auburn experience, you are informed. That's all about Auburn sports, Auburn culture, Auburn family stuff here. The easier way to say it, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. So thank you so much for joining us and what we're going to be doing today. Ever to Podcast, episode 73. I'm your host, as always, Kyle Loomis, and today's date is October 16th, 2025. As I warned you all on other content, but the last episode of Ever to Podcast, which was last week, we're going to be a little bit spotty here and there over these last few weeks, and still for the foreseeable future right now in terms of some of our regular schedule for our content, specifically this as well. We try to give you multiple of these throughout the middle of the week. We're finally getting around to doing one of these, so I appreciate your patience and understanding that. But you've had a ton of content this week, just in audio format alone here, other than just this show, besides the regular Ever to Podcast here, obviously, but the Auburn Experience show. You've had the post-game stats show for basketball, war horses. We even had an episode of Track 'em Tigers with AJ for football stories. You got a lot of stuff. So anyway, just keep that in mind as we go forward here today. So since this is a little bit spotty when we're able to do this episode, and we try to counter with the real quick, up-to-date type of news things, this is going to be a little bit different format. I'm going to just kind of catch up a lot of the big stuff and the big sports that's been happening, certainly football, basketball, a lot going on in those two different spaces. So I think that's where we'll spend most of our time today. Let's start with football. There has been a lot that has transpired since we last got together on Ever to Podcast. We've covered it on other content as well. But obviously, Auburn is sitting here in the middle of a 3-game losing streak in SEC play and overall specifically, which can be very discouraging on the outside looking in, and certainly even just talking about it, frankly, it's very discouraging at times as well. Been a lot of feelings and emotions and consternation about all of this. I think at times it is warranted. At times it is a little bit overblown and emotional and lacks a lot of context. But the reality is this. We sit at a time period where Coach Hugh Freeze has certainly done a great job in recruiting, done a great job in getting those recruits onto the field early and giving them opportunities to show that they were the right recruits and become all SEC type of contributors, even as true freshmen, true sophomore. But the on-the-field results for the bigger games, the most important games, especially the SEC, really hasn't been there quite yet. But there's also the counter side of you've played 3 top 10 teams in a row, essentially top 15, 10, depending on where they were at exactly when we played them. And you had a shot to win each and every one of them. So we're not going to be able to cover the full nuances of it in this particular show, but just acknowledging what's been going on and then some conversations about certainly what's the future of Auburn look like. Does there need to be a change made? I'm going to continue to encourage you. Most of you don't want to hear this, but I'm going to say it no matter. There's nothing productive that comes from you engaging, promoting, pushing for a coaching change at this current juncture. That is going to happen regardless of how you feel about it if that continues. So at this point, it really just doesn't contribute anything to your life, to the team, for you to continue to promote that and be a part of that unproductive, destructive type of commentary and line of thinking. You don't have to agree with me on that, but I promise you, if you can retool the way you think about that, you'll have a much better and more well-rounded view of football right now. Another thing in the football space that kind of added to all of this, Damari Alston, former teammate for the Auburn Tigers and former captain, former starting running back for Auburn football this year, is no longer with the football team. There was a lot of current controversy about that this week, specifically about what exactly happened. Been a lot of stories, been a lot of opinions, a lot of them wrong. A lot of them very biased in their take. My first advice on this subject is be very, very careful who you are allowing, not just on this subject, but in general, speak into your opinions about what's going on with Auburn football. There comes a time where we just report things, and then there comes a time where we really let our biases get in the way. And certainly I'm susceptible. Anybody that works with us here at E2C Network is susceptible to that as well. But I think sometimes it goes overboard, and I think some of that happened this weekend. Now, listen, I don't know Damari personally. We've interacted with him a few times on social media. I'm just I'm hurt that he's not going to be part of the team anymore. I'm hurt that apparently he chose not to be part of the team anymore. That is the correct word out there as far as we can tell from the most information. Now, there are speculations about he wanted a red shirt. It wasn't given to him. He was expected to be a leader and chose not to be in that way. Only people that know what is exactly true are Damari and obviously Coach Hugh Freeze and any of the other coaches that were involved with that. So it's important to remember that your opinion, probably your emotions about this situation, probably your first instinct isn't correct, especially when you're sitting in a time where people are looking for reasons to be mad at Coach Hugh Freeze and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily defending him. I know it feels that way, but I'm just trying to point out something that I see just as a, how do we put this? A inappropriate and sometimes ill-advised way of going about certain distinctions and certain moments in time in Auburn football. Certainly this is one of them. Sad that he's not going to be part of the team going forward. But when someone leaves, that leaves a vacuum for someone else to be filled. Omar Mapson is going to get that number 2 slot with Darrell Robinson still dealing with his injury. He happened earlier in the year. Alvin Henderson just hasn't broken through yet in terms of getting some reps. I mean, he's now closer than he's ever been, but you got to love this story. If you want to look for something to be excited about right now while things don't seem to be all peachy keen, Omar Mapson, hometown kid, a lot of hype during the preseason. He is now running back 2 right behind Jeremiah Cobb. And a lot of people wanted Jeremiah as the number 1 back anyway, so you kind of got your wish there. But that's really kind of a cool story beyond happening amongst some of the consternation, some of the frustration, things like that. So there's football. There's plenty that we're not going to have time to talk about today just because we're trying to catch up a little bit here. But let's shift over to basketball, men's basketball specifically, but men's and women's did have their preseason event, the SEC tip-off in Birmingham. We heard from Coach Vickers. We heard from Coach Stephen Pearl. One day we'll all just accept it as it is and not assume that, have to clarify which one we're talking about. But Coach Stephen Pearl, Coach Vickers spoke about their season. I really enjoyed hearing from both of them. If you haven't, go check out their press conferences. I think you can get them at secsports.com and listen, especially to Coach Vickers talking about how much work he felt he had to do on the recruiting trail to put this team together. And if you followed that, it's pretty apparent at times with some of the way the roster turnover happened and how they were able to retain some very important pieces too. But with men's basketball, there's been a lot going on even outside of SEC tip-off and just the transition to Coach Stephen Pearl. They had their first game of the preseason of 2, and wow, what a big one. Oklahoma State, Boutwell Arena in Birmingham, and it was not even mid-season form type of fun, basketball fun, but postseason, and that was used a lot last night, and I tend to agree with that. Now, Auburn does lose 97-95 in overtime for a preseason game. And it is one of those things you wonder, do the coaches just kind of go, okay, we're done? Don't want to hurt anybody? Because there were a few players that got banged up a little bit last night. Keyshawn Murphy exited the game a little bit earlier, but he seemed to be okay as far as it looks right now. One of their players got banged up in overtime, and he got pulled to the bench, I think, for the rest of overtime, and they still won. But the story of the game is Oklahoma State, came out shooting lights out, especially 3 of their guys in 20 points. Auburn, I thought, did really well. I thought its guards played strong. The defense probably on both sides was a little bit lacking at times, but that's to be expected in your first action, even not legitimate action of the season with conditioning, discipline, things like that. So I'm not shocked in any way about that. It was so good to see Tahad out there. It was so good to see Keyshawn Hall, and he looks legit, as all of the speculation was about how good of a player he was going to be in just one game. And even some more players like Elijah Freeman, see if that's going to be the starting lineup. That was Elijah Freeman, Keyshawn Murphy, Keyshawn Hall, Kevin Overton, I thought played quietly very well. Not quietly, but more quiet than some of the other stories out there. And obviously Tahad Pettiford and plenty of others. Sebastian Williams-Adams got a lot of time, especially when Keyshawn Murphy went down. But anyway, all that to be said, first action, don't overreact to anything there. That was just a lot of fun to watch and with no implications whatsoever on the season other than prepping for it. And just a little quick note, Todd Pettiford was named first team preseason All-SEC. No surprise there. If you watched his first season, if tendency is for Auburn to get gypped a little bit in these preseason SEC lists or even the postseason ones, happy to see that they recognize what Auburn has in Todd Pettiford and who Todd Pettiford actually is. So I think that's a pretty good smattering of the two big sports that are happening right now, and people are wanting to catch up on some of those things. Once again, I apologize for the regular or lack of regularness of this particular show. We will be getting slowly back into gear of those things once my good personal stuff on the back end here starts to kind of wind down, but we're giving you tons of content, especially this week as we get back into gear. Check it out all over the place. Specifically, would love for you tonight, if you're listening to this episode on the day it came out, Thursday, for the preview and prediction show, Auburn versus Missouri. We'll predict the score, but we'll predict much more than that. It's a really fun, interactive show. Would love to have you there at 9 Eastern, 8 Central for the preview and prediction show, Auburn versus Missouri. Other than that, thank you for being here, participating, and being part of our little family within the Auburn family. And as we leave you, I want to remind you, the Auburn Creed asks you to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. We ask you to do the same. War Eagle.